The hearing chamber was cold and formal. Rows of seats rose in a semicircle around a central platform where Tae-hyun sat alone. The panel of judges consisted of 12 delegates from different species, chosen to represent a cross-section of coalition membership. Thexer sat among them, his reptilian face showing satisfaction. The chamber was full. Every delegate at the summit seemed to have found a seat or standing space. This hearing had become about more than one human's words. It had become a referendum on human philosophy itself. The lead judge, a tall insectoid with compound eyes, called the session to order. We are here to determine whether human diplomat Tae-hyun engaged in manipulation of coalition arbitrator Velara through calculated deception. The evidence will be presented and the accused will have opportunity to respond. Thexor stood to present the case against Tae-hyun. His voice was hard and certain. The evidence is clear. The human studied Ethrans extensively before this summit. He learned their psychology, their social isolation, their vulnerability to positive attention. Then he deliberately targeted arbitrator Velara with carefully crafted flattery designed to compromise her professional judgment. Holographic displays showed Tae-hyun's research history, his file access logs, his purchases of academic materials. Taken together, they painted a picture of deliberate preparation. Furthermore, Thexer continued, witness testimony confirms that the human's approach was smooth and practiced. He showed no hesitation, no uncertainty. This was a planned operation, not a spontaneous interaction. Several delegates nodded. The evidence looked bad. Tae-hyun was given permission to respond. He stood, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. He'd prepared a speech with Ambassador Park, a careful political defense. But looking at the faces around him, he realized that politics wouldn't work here. Truth was the only weapon he had. I did research Ethrans before this summit, he said. I also researched Vrexians, Tyrell, Vrail, and 30 other species. I studied everyone because I wanted to understand the people I'd be working with. That's not manipulation. That's respect. He activated his own display. Here's my complete research history. Yes, I studied Ethrans, but look at the depth. I didn't just learn about their vulnerabilities. I learned about their art, their philosophy, their contributions to the coalition. I learned about them as a people, not as targets. The display showed hundreds of files, notes, and documents about dozens of species. As for my approach being smooth and practiced, I can't defend against that except to say this. I treat everyone the same way. I try to see them as individuals. I try to find something worth appreciating in every person I meet. If that looks practiced, maybe it's because I've practiced being a decent human being. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some delegates looked thoughtful. Others remained skeptical. Tae-hyun took a breath and continued. But I think this hearing is missing the real point. You're not really asking if I manipulated Velara. You're asking if the human way of seeing beauty is dangerous. You're asking if it's safe to let a species into the coalition that doesn't judge by appearance. That is not... Thexer began. Let him finish, the lead judge said. Tae-hyun activated a new display. Images from Earth filled the air. This is my world. These are my people. And we are not perfect. We spent thousands of years hurting each other over differences in appearance. We enslaved people because of skin color. We killed people because of facial features. We built entire systems of oppression based on physical characteristics. The images showed humanity's dark history, wars, discrimination, cruelty based on appearance. We carry shame for these things, deep shame. And we learned from them, slowly and painfully. We learned that judging by appearance is not just wrong, it's wasteful. We miss out on brilliant minds, kind hearts, brave souls, all because we couldn't see past surface features. New images appeared, humans of every variation working together, creating together, living together. So we taught ourselves differently. We taught our children that beauty is diverse. We exposed them to different faces, different bodies, different ways of being. We learned to celebrate difference instead of fearing it. He turned to address the panel directly. When I looked at Velara, I didn't see a threat assessment problem. I saw an individual who'd been isolated for doing nothing wrong. I saw someone whose appearance was unique and striking. And yes, I found her gorgeous because I've been taught my whole life that different is beautiful. Tae-hyun paused, then spoke more quietly. You can call that manipulation if you want. You can call it dangerous or naive, but it's authentically human. And if that's not acceptable to the coalition, then maybe Earth doesn't belong here. The chamber fell silent. Even Thexer seemed taken aback by the raw honesty. The lead judge spoke. Does anyone else wish to present evidence? Velara stood in the audience section. I do. She walked to the center platform. Her appendages were still, her bioluminescent patterns steady. I am arbitrator Velara. I have served the Coalition for 23 years with distinction. My record is available for review. The lead judge nodded. The arbitrator's reputation is not in question. Good, Velara said. Then let me be clear. Taehyun did not manipulate me. I am not compromised. I am not naive. I am a trained professional with decades of experience reading intent and detecting deception. She gestured to Taehyun. What he did was simple. He treated me like a person instead of a problem. He offered genuine appreciation instead of polite tolerance. And he did it naturally without calculation because that's who he is. How can you be certain? Asked one of the judges. Because I've seen calculation, Velara said. I've seen manipulation. I've mediated disputes where every word was a weapon, every gesture a strategy. That's not what happened with Taehyun. He simply spoke truthfully about what he saw. Ambassador Park stood. May I provide additional context? The lead judge granted permission. Park approached the platform. I've supervised Taehyun for 3 years. I've watched him work with dozens of species and hundreds of individuals. His approach is always the same. He looks for the positive in every person. He tries to understand rather than judge. Sometimes it makes him vulnerable. Sometimes it causes problems. But it's never been an act. Harin stood as well. I can provide scientific context. Human aesthetic appreciation is neurologically distinct from threat assessment. Brain imaging shows that when humans find something beautiful, different neural pathways activate than when they assess danger. Taehyun's response to Velara was aesthetic appreciation, not threat miscalculation. She displayed brain scans and data. Furthermore, human children show this same pattern. When exposed to unfamiliar faces or creatures, they show curiosity activation, rather than fear activation more often than any other known species. This isn't learned behavior. It's intrinsic to human neurology. Delegate after delegate stood to speak. The bird-like delegate from earlier spoke about how Taehyun's words had given his species hope. The plant-like Vrail representative described how human philosophy had opened new diplomatic channels. Even some species that had initially been skeptical admitted that the human perspective had value. Finally, the lead judge called for order. We have heard extensive testimony. The panel will deliberate. The judges conferred quietly for several minutes. The chamber waited in tense silence. When they returned to their positions, the lead judge spoke. We have reached a conclusion. The charges of manipulation are dismissed. The evidence shows that human diplomat Taehyun acted according to his species' genuine cultural and perceptual standards. While these standards are unusual by coalition norms, they do not constitute deception or manipulation. Relief washed through the human delegation. Velara's patterns glowed brightly, but the lead judge wasn't finished. However, this hearing has raised larger questions. The coalition was founded on principles of cooperation and mutual respect. Yet we have allowed appearance-based hierarchies to develop. We have marginalized species based on how they look rather than what they contribute. Thexer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Humanity's perspective, while unusual, offers a correction to these imbalances. Therefore, this panel recommends that the coalition adopt new protocols for interspecies relations. Protocols that emphasize behavior and intent over appearance. Protocols that actively work against appearance-based discrimination. Shock rippled through the chamber. This was far more than anyone had expected. The human delegate's simple act of kindness has revealed flaws in our system. The lead judge continued. Flaws we should address. This hearing is concluded, but the conversation it started must continue. As the chamber emptied, delegates clustered in small groups discussing the implications. Some were excited. Others were worried. Change was coming whether they liked it or not. Taehyun found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Jiwoo hugged him, which was unusual for her. Ambassador Park simply nodded with approval. Arin was already planning follow-up research projects. Velara waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. You did it, she said simply. We did it, Taehyun corrected. I couldn't have survived that without you speaking up. I only told the truth. So did I. Maybe that's all it takes sometimes. Just telling the truth and hoping it's enough. They walked together to the observation deck. 3 days passed after the assembly session. The summit continued with its scheduled negotiations, but everything felt different. Delegates who had never acknowledged each other before were having conversations. Species that had been isolated were suddenly being approached with curiosity rather than fear, but not everyone was happy about the changes. Tae-hyun sat in a small cafe on the station's commercial level, reviewing notes for the afternoon session. The cafe was designed to accommodate multiple species, with different atmospheric zones and varied seating. He'd chosen a table in the human-compatible section, near a viewport. Velara arrived exactly on time. They'd started meeting like this unofficially to discuss the ongoing reactions to their conversation. She sat across from him, her crystalline features catching the light from the nearby star. "I received a message from my homeworld," she said without greeting. "The Ethran Council is divided on what happened here." "Divided how?" Tae-hyun asked, setting down his datapad. "Some see it as an opportunity. They hope this might improve relations with other species. Others think I'm being naive, that I'm letting myself be manipulated for human political gain." Her appendages moved slowly, a sign of sadness. "My own sister sent a message warning me to be careful. She thinks you're using me." "I'm not," Tae-hyun said firmly. "You know that, right?" "I do. But they don't know you. They only know humans by reputation, and that reputation is mixed at best." A server approached, a small robotic unit designed to interact with multiple species. They ordered drinks and sat in silence for a moment after it left. "It's not just the Ethrans," Velara continued. "I've received messages from dozens of species. Some are grateful, saying what you said gave them hope. Others are angry, claiming I've betrayed my position as an impartial arbitrator by defending human philosophy." "I'm sorry," Tae-hyun said. "I never meant to make your life harder." "Don't apologize for being honest," Velara said. "That's the whole point, isn't it? Honesty is what started this." Jiwoo appeared at the cafe entrance. She spotted them and hurried over, her face tense. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Tae-hyun asked. Jiwoo glanced at Velara, then back to Tae-hyun. "Can we talk privately?" "Anything you need to say you can say in front of Velara." Jiwoo sighed and sat down. "Fine. There's a formal complaint being filed against you. Several delegations are claiming that your comments about Velara were part of a calculated strategy to manipulate coalition arbitrators." "That's absurd," Tae-hyun said. "Maybe, but they're building a case. They claim you studied Ethran psychology before the summit. That you deliberately approached Velara, knowing she'd be vulnerable to flattery because of her species' isolation." Velara's appendages went rigid. "That's not what happened. I know that and you know that," Jiwoo said. "But they're going to present evidence in a closed session tomorrow. If the charges stick, Tae-hyun could be expelled from the summit. Worse, it could damage Earth's standing in the coalition. What evidence could they possibly have?" Tae-hyun demanded. "Access logs showing you reviewed coalition files on Ethrans 2 weeks before the summit. Purchase records indicating you bought academic texts on Ethran culture. Even your choice to approach Velara specifically, out of all the delegates at the summit." Tae-hyun laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I did research on every major species before coming here. That's called preparation, not manipulation. And I approached Velara because she was standing alone and looked like she could use someone to talk to. That's called being a decent person." "I believe you," Jiwoo said. "But they're going to twist everything to fit their narrative." Velara stood abruptly. "I need to speak with the Council of Arbitrators." "Wait," Tae-hyun said, standing as well. "You can't get dragged into this. My position requires me to seek truth and fairness," Velara interrupted. "If you're being falsely accused, I have a duty to speak. But if you defend him, they'll say you're compromised," Jiwoo pointed out. "That you're too emotionally involved to be objective." "Perhaps I am emotionally involved," Velara said quietly. "Tae-hyun showed me kindness when no one else would. He saw me as an individual when others saw only something to avoid. If that compromises my objectivity, then objectivity is overrated." She left before either of them could respond. Jiwoo turned to Tae-hyun. "You've made quite an impression on her." "It's not like that," Tae-hyun said, sitting back down heavily. "We're friends. Or at least I think we are. Is friendship supposed to be this complicated in space?" "Everything is complicated in space," Jiwoo said. She ordered a drink from the passing server robot. "Ambassador Park wants to see you. He's working on a defense strategy." The meeting with Park took place in a secure room. The ambassador looked older than he had a week ago, stress evident in the lines of his face. "I've been doing this for 30 years, Park said, "and I've never seen anything quite like this situation. You've somehow managed to turn a compliment into a diplomatic crisis." "That wasn't my intention," Taehyun said. "I know. That's the frustrating part. If you'd been playing politics, at least I'd understand the strategy." Park pulled up a holographic display showing various documents. "Here's what they have. Your research into Ethran culture, which looks damning if you assume bad intent. Your approach to Velara, which they're framing as calculated targeting, and witness statements from delegates who claim your behavior was too smooth, too practiced to be spontaneous." "It wasn't practiced. I just talked to her like a normal person." "That's your defense?" Park asked. "That you're naturally good at making people feel valued?" "I guess so," Taehyun said. "Is that so hard to believe?" Park studied him for a long moment. "No, actually. I've watched you work for 3 years. You're genuine to a fault. It's one of your strengths and one of your weaknesses. So what do? We present your side tomorrow. We show that your research was standard preparation. We demonstrate that your approach to Velara was consistent with how you interact with everyone. We make the case that human social behavior is being misinterpreted through alien cultural lenses." Haran entered the room without knocking. "Ambassador, I need to speak with Taehyun." Park gestured for her to continue. "I've been analyzing communication patterns across species," Haran said, pulling up her own data. "I think I've found something important. The species pushing hardest for your condemnation are all ones that rely heavily on appearance-based social hierarchies. Species where looking strong or intimidating provides political power. So they're threatened by the human perspective," Taehyun said. "Exactly. If beauty and value aren't tied to intimidation, their entire social structure gets questioned. You're not just challenging their view of Velara, you're challenging their view of themselves." Park leaned back in his chair. "That's useful context. We can frame this as resistance to change rather than legitimate concern." A message came through on the room's communication system. It was from Velara. "I need to meet with Taehyun. Privately, it's urgent." Park looked at Taehyun. "Go, but be careful. Everything you say and do is being watched right now." Taehyun met Velara in one of the station's garden sections, an area maintained for species that needed plant life. They walked along a path surrounded by alien flowers and trees, speaking quietly. "The Council of Arbitrators met," Velara said. "They've decided to recuse themselves from the hearing tomorrow. They claim the situation is too politically sensitive for them to judge fairly." "What does that mean?" "It means the hearing will be conducted by senior delegates from various species, and those delegates have their own political interests." Velara's appendages moved anxiously. "I spoke with some of them privately. Many have already decided you're guilty." "So the hearing is just theater," Taehyun said. "They've already made up their minds. Not all of them. Some are genuinely uncertain. If we present the right evidence, if we tell the truth effectively, we might sway enough of them." Taehyun stopped walking. "Velara, you don't have to fight this battle with me. You've already done more than enough." "I'm not fighting for you," Velara said. "I'm fighting for what's right, and for what's possible. If they destroy you over this, they destroy the hope that things can be different." They stood in the alien garden, surrounded by strange beauty. Two beings from different worlds united by an unexpected friendship. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Taehyun said, "thank you for believing me." Velara's patterns glowed softly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for seeing me." By the next morning, everyone at the summit knew about the human and the Ethran. The story had spread through the station like wildfire. Some delegates thought it was romantic. Others thought it was dangerous. A few thought it was stupid. Taehyun sat in the human delegation's meeting room, facing 3 senior diplomats who did not look happy. Jiwoo sat beside him, her expression carefully neutral. "You created a spectacle," said Ambassador Park, the head of Earth's delegation. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. "The Vrexian delegation is using this as evidence that humans are too immature for serious diplomatic work." "I was having a conversation," Taehyun said. "I didn't know it would become public." "Everything is public at these summits," Park said. "You should know that by now." "With respect, Ambassador, I don't regret what I said. I meant every word." Park sighed and rubbed his temples. "That's what worries me. If you'd been lying for political gain, I could work with that. But genuine honesty and diplomacy is like a grenade without a pin. A knock on the door interrupted them. A young assistant entered. Ambassador Park, there's a request for a special session. Multiple delegations want to discuss human aesthetic philosophy and its implications for coalition policy. Park stared at the assistant. You're joking. No, sir. The request was filed an hour ago. It already has the required number of signatures. Jiwoo leaned toward Taehyun. See what you did? Is that good or bad? Taehyun whispered back. We're about to find out. The special session was held in one of the smaller assembly halls, but it was packed. Delegates filled every seat and more stood along the walls. Taehyun sat at a table facing the crowd, feeling like he was on trial. Ambassador Park sat beside him, looking resigned to whatever was about to happen. A neutral moderator, a floating jellyfish-like creature, opened the session. We are here to discuss the incident between human diplomat Taehyun and arbitrator Velara. Several delegations have requested clarity on human perceptual standards and their impact on threat assessment protocols. Thexor stood immediately. I will speak first. The human's behavior demonstrates a fundamental flaw in their species' judgment. They cannot properly assess danger based on appearance. This makes them unpredictable and potentially hazardous to coalition security. A murmur of agreement rippled through parts of the crowd. May I respond? Taehyun asked. The moderator's tentacles waved in acknowledgement. Taehyun stood. He'd spent all night preparing for this, but now that the moment had arrived, he decided to speak from the heart instead. I understand why my words seem strange. Many species use appearance as a primary threat indicator. It makes sense from a survival perspective. If something looks dangerous, avoid it or fight it. Exactly, Thexor said. This is basic evolutionary logic. But humans learn to override that instinct, Taehyun continued. Not because we're careless, but because we're curious. Yes, there were times when that curiosity got us killed, but there were more times when it led to discovery, to friendship, to progress. He activated a holographic display. Images from Earth appeared, floating above the table. This is a deep-sea anglerfish. Most humans would call it ugly if they're being polite, terrifying if they're being honest. But we study it. We're amazed by it. We make children's movies featuring creatures like this as heroes. The next image showed a microscopic view. This is a tardigrade, a tiny creature that can survive in the vacuum of space. It looks like a nightmare under a microscope, but we call it amazing. We celebrate its ability to survive. More images followed. Strange rock formations, unusual cloud patterns, bizarre plants. Humans find beauty in strangeness. We always have. It's not a flaw in our perception. It's a feature, a new voice spoke up. It was the bird-like delegate from yesterday. But this makes you vulnerable. If you can't judge threats properly, how have you survived? We can judge threats, Taehyun said. We just don't judge them only by appearance. We look at behavior, context, intent. A creature can look terrifying and be harmless. Another can look beautiful and be deadly. Humans learn to look deeper. The door to the assembly hall opened and Velara entered. Every head turned to watch her walk to the front. She moved with more confidence than usual, her appendages held high. May I speak? She asked the moderator. The arbitrator has the floor. Velara faced the assembly. I have served the coalition for 23 years. In that time, I have mediated disputes, negotiated treaties, and observed hundreds of species interact. I'm good at my job because I learned to be invisible. I learned to make others comfortable by minimizing my presence. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed. But yesterday, a human saw me, not as a threat to be managed or a problem to be solved. He saw me as an individual, and he expressed appreciation for qualities that others find disturbing. He manipulated you, Thexor said. Did he? Velara's appendages moved sharply. To what end? Humans have no special relationship with Etherans. We've barely interacted before this summit. What strategic advantage does flattery gain him? Thexor had no answer. Another delegate stood, a humanoid with blue skin. I represent the Tyrell Collective. We are considered physically weak by coalition standards. Other species often dismiss us in negotiations because we lack impressive physical traits. This human perspective interests us. It interests many of us, said a delegate who resembled a walking plant. The Vrail have been marginalized for decades because other species find our appearance unsettling. If humans truly see beauty in diversity, perhaps there is hope for different relationships. Ambassador Park stood. If I may add context, Earth has a difficult history with prejudice based on appearance. Humans spent thousands of years discriminating against each other over tiny physical differences. We fought wars over skin color, eye shape, height, and countless other trivial variations. He paused, letting that sink in. We're not proud of that history, but we learned from it. We learned that judging individuals based on appearance is not only cruel, it's stupid. We miss opportunities, we create enemies where we could have friends, and we limit our own growth. A new voice joined the discussion. It came from near the back of the hall. I am Harin, human xenobiologist. May I provide scientific context? The moderator waved approval. Harin made her way to the front. She was younger than Park, with sharp, intelligent eyes. Human aesthetic appreciation is linked to our neuroplasticity. Our brains are exceptionally good at forming new patterns and associations. We can learn to find beauty in almost anything if we're exposed to it with positive context. She activated her own holographic display. Studies show that humans find baby animals of almost any species adorable, even species that adults would find threatening. This is because our nurturing instincts override our threat assessment when we see infant characteristics. So humans are ruled by emotion rather than logic, Thexor said. That proves my point. No, Harin countered. It proves we integrate emotional and logical responses. We don't ignore threats. We simply don't assume something is a threat based solely on appearance. We gather more data before making judgments. The assembly descended into argument. Some species supported the human perspective. Others condemned it. A few sat quietly, clearly thinking about implications. Velara raised her voice above the noise. The question is not whether humans are right or wrong. The question is whether their perspective has value for the coalition. I believe it does. Why? Demanded Thexor. Because the coalition has become stagnant, Velara said bluntly. We have rigid hierarchies based largely on appearance and physical power. Species that look intimidating receive more respect. Species that appear weak are dismissed. This has created an imbalanced system where military might matters more than wisdom or innovation. She gestured to Taehyun. Humans offer a different model. Not perfect, but different. And difference is exactly what we need if we're going to grow as a coalition. The moderator's tentacles waved for order. This session has provided much to consider. I propose we table formal discussion and allow delegates to reflect on what has been said. As the assembly broke up, small groups formed throughout the hall. Delegates who had never spoken before found themselves in conversation. The bird-like delegate approached Harin with questions. The plant-like Vrail spoke hesitantly with Jiwoo. Taehyun found himself surrounded by delegates wanting to understand more about human perception. He answered their questions as honestly as he could, aware that every word might have consequences he couldn't predict. Velara stood apart from the crowd, watching. When Taehyun finally extracted himself and approached her, she spoke quietly. You've started something that cannot be stopped. Is that good or bad? I don't know yet, Velara said. But it's certainly interesting. Taehyun took a breath before answering. He seemed to be gathering his thoughts, trying to find the right words. The observation deck had grown crowded now. Delegates from a dozen species watched from the entrance, none daring to come closer. Because beauty isn't about familiarity, Taehyun said finally, at least not for humans. We don't find things beautiful just because they look like us. Velara's crystalline features tilted slightly. Explain. On Earth we have these phenomena called auroras, lights in the sky near the poles. They happen when particles from the sun interact with our atmosphere. He gestured to the patterns moving across her skin. Your bioluminescence reminds me of that. It's mesmerizing. People travel thousands of miles just to see auroras for a few minutes. I am not a weather pattern, Velara said, but her tone had softened. No, you're not. You're better. Auroras are random. Your patterns seem intentional, like they mean something. Taehyun smiled. And your features, the crystalline structure. We have gems on Earth that people treasure for exactly that quality, the way they catch light and transform it into something magical. One of Velara's shoulder appendages moved toward him slightly, then pulled back. Most species find my appendages disturbing. Why? They're expressive. I've been watching them move while we talk. They react to your emotions, don't they? That's fascinating. Humans have to guess what someone is feeling from tiny changes in facial expression. You literally wear your feelings in motion. A small insectoid delegate near the entrance chittered something in its own language. Its translator device rendered it in the common tongue. The human speaks strangely. Does he not understand threat assessment? Taehyun heard but didn't turn around. He kept his attention on Velara. Can I ask you something? When you look at me, what do you see? Velara seemed surprised by the question. Her eyes moved over his face. I see a human. Soft skin, small eyes, vulnerable body structure, no natural weapons or armor, no sensory appendages beyond the basic 5 senses. Does that make me ugly to you? No, Velara said after a pause. Different. Strange, perhaps, but not ugly. Exactly, Taehyun said. Different doesn't mean ugly. It just means different. And different can be beautiful. Jiwoo finally entered the observation deck properly. She approached carefully like someone approaching a nervous animal. Taehyun, maybe we should… It's fine, Jiwoo, he said without looking away from Velara. We're just talking. Everyone in the station is watching you just talk, Jiwoo muttered, but she didn't try to pull him away. Velara moved to a bench near the viewport and sat down. After a moment's hesitation, Taehyun joined her. They sat in silence for a few heartbeats looking out at the stars. Tell me more about human beauty, Velara said. I want to understand this perspective. Taehyun leaned back against the bench. Where do I start? We have this thing on Earth, deep in the oceans, creatures that live in complete darkness. Some of them create their own light, like you do. Some have bodies that would seem monstrous if you saw them out of water, but humans make documentaries about them. We call them beautiful. We're fascinated by them. They're your own species' creations, Velara pointed out. Of course you find them interesting. But they're not like us at all, Taehyun countered. Most of them don't even have faces we'd recognize. Some are just floating masses with tentacles. Some look like they're from nightmares. But we still find them beautiful because they exist, because they're unique, because they survived in impossible conditions. He turned to look at her directly. Humans spent most of their history afraid of differences. We fought wars over skin color, over facial features, over tiny variations in appearance. It was stupid and cruel. But we learned slowly that beauty exists in diversity, not despite it. Because of it. A large reptilian delegate pushed forward through the crowd. His scales were dark green and his eyes were cold. This is propaganda, he announced. The human is manipulating the arbitrator. Taehyun finally turned to look at the crowd. I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm answering a question honestly. Humans are known for their deception, the reptilian said. His name was Thexor, a senior diplomat from a warrior species. And your species is known for judging threats based on appearance. Taehyun replied calmly. But I'm not a threat to you despite what your instincts might say. Just like Velara isn't a threat to me despite what her appearance might suggest to others. Velara stood up suddenly. Her appendages moved rapidly, a clear sign of agitation. I have been an arbitrator for 23 years. In that time I have learned to read intent and deception. This human speaks truthfully, even if his truth seems strange to you. He's charmed you, Thexor said. Already his words have affected your judgment. No, Velara said firmly. He's given me perspective. There's a difference. A smaller delegate, covered in fur and standing on 4 legs, spoke up. But why would humans think this way? What evolutionary advantage does it give them? Taehyun considered the question. Maybe it's because we were explorers before we were warriors. Humans always wanted to see what was over the next hill, across the next ocean, beyond the next planet. If we were afraid of everything different, we never would have left our caves. That's a dangerous way to live, Thexor said. Curiosity without caution leads to extinction. Maybe, Taehyun admitted. But it also leads to discovery, to friendship, to understanding. Jiwoo touched his shoulder gently. Taehyun, the senior delegates will want to hear about this conversation. It's becoming a diplomatic incident. A diplomatic incident? Velara said. Because a human offered a compliment? Because a human challenged the way everyone thinks about appearance and threat assessment, Jiwoo said. She didn't sound angry, just tired. That's bigger than a compliment. Taehyun looked at Velara. I'm sorry if I caused problems for you. Don't be, Velara said. Her patterns glowed brighter for a moment. In 23 years, this is the first genuine conversation I've had about my appearance. Usually people either avoid the subject entirely, or they try very hard to pretend they're not uncomfortable. I'm not uncomfortable, Taehyun said simply. I know. That's what makes this so strange. Velara's appendages moved in a pattern that seemed almost like a smile, and interesting. Thexor made a disgusted sound and pushed back through the crowd. Others followed him, muttering to each other in various languages. But some remained, watching the human and the Ethrin with new curiosity. A small bird-like delegate hopped forward. "I have a question for the human." "Ask," Taehyun said. "My species is considered ugly by most coalition standards. Our feathers are dull, our songs are harsh, our movements are awkward. Would you call us beautiful too?" Taehyun looked at the delegate carefully. "I don't know enough about your species to answer honestly, but I'd be willing to learn. Beauty takes understanding. The more you know about something, the more you can appreciate what makes it special." The bird-like delegate made a chirping sound that might have been approval or surprise. Velara stood. "I need to think about this conversation, but I would like to speak with you again, Taehyun of Earth." "I'd like that," he said, standing as well. As Velara walked toward the exit, the crowd parted for her as it always did. But this time, a few delegates nodded respectfully as she passed. A few even met her eyes. Jiwoo grabbed Taehyun's arm. "Do you realize what you just did?" "Had a conversation?" "Started a revolution," Jiwoo said. "And I don't think anyone, including you, knows where it's going to end." The Meridian Point Station floated in the darkness of space like a massive crystal flower. Inside its transparent walls, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds moved through the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some flew with wings, others floated without any visible means. The Galactic Coalition Summit had brought them all together. Taehyun stood near a large window watching the stars beyond. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. His hands were clasped behind his back as he thought about the morning's difficult negotiations. 3 years had passed since humanity joined the galactic community, and every meeting still felt like walking on thin ice. The other species didn't trust humans yet. They thought Earth's people were too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Maybe they were right. Taehyun had read the history books. Humanity had spent most of its existence fighting itself. "You look tired," said Jiwoo, approaching from behind. She was Taehyun's colleague, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. "The Vrexian delegation is still angry about the mining rights discussion." Taehyun nodded slowly. "They'll calm down. We offered a fair compromise." "Fair by human standards," Jiwoo said. "Not by theirs." Before Taehyun could respond, the crowd in the corridor seemed to part. A tall figure moved through the space, and he noticed how other delegates stepped aside, some turning their heads away. The figure stood at least 7 feet tall, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Patterns of light moved across her body like slow lightning. Her face had sharp angles, almost crystalline, and several thin appendages moved gently from her shoulders. She was an Ethrin. Taehyun had seen them before, but always from a distance. Most species avoided the Ethrins. He had heard the whispers. They called them strange, unsettling, wrong, but Taehyun didn't see what they saw. He saw someone walking alone through a crowd that feared her. He saw the slight hesitation in her movements, as if she was used to making herself smaller. He saw someone trying to be invisible in a room full of people. Without thinking too much about it, Taehyun walked toward her. Jiwoo made a small sound of warning behind him, but he ignored it. "Excuse me," he said, speaking in the common galactic language. "Are you heading to the observation deck?" The Ethrin woman stopped. Her head turned toward him, and he saw surprise flash across her crystalline features. Several of her shoulder appendages moved quickly, a sign of emotion he couldn't quite read. "I am," she said. Her voice had a strange quality to it, like wind chimes, though I prefer to go there when it's empty. "I won't disturb you for long," Taehyun said with a smile. "I just wanted some fresh perspective. These negotiations are giving me a headache." The woman studied him carefully. Her eyes were large and multifaceted, catching the light from every angle. "You're human. Part of the Earth delegation." "Guilty," Taehyun said. "My name is Taehyun. I'm one of the junior diplomats, which means I do all the boring work while the senior ones take credit." A small sound came from her, almost like a laugh. "I am Velara. I serve as an arbitrator for the coalition." "An arbitrator? That's impressive. You must have seen hundreds of these summits." "Too many," Velara said. She began walking again, and Taehyun fell into step beside her. Around them, other delegates watched with wide eyes. A few whispered to each other. They reached the observation deck, a vast dome of transparent material that offered a view of the surrounding space. Only a few beings were present, and they quickly left when Velara entered. Taehyun noticed but said nothing. Instead, he walked to the railing and looked out at the stars. It never gets old, does it? Looking at all that space. Velora joined him at the railing, keeping a respectful distance. Most humans I've met seem uncomfortable in space. They prefer the weight of a planet beneath their feet. Some do, Taehyun admitted. But I've always liked it up here. Makes you realize how small our problems are. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence. Then Taehyun turned to look at her properly. The light from a nearby star caught her crystalline features, making them sparkle. The patterns on her skin pulsed gently, creating waves of soft blue and purple light. "You're gorgeous," he said simply. The words hung in the air between them. Velara's appendages froze in place. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly, then stopped altogether. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice strange and tight. "I said you're gorgeous," Taehyun repeated. He seemed genuinely confused by her reaction. "Is that rude?" "I'm sorry if that's rude. Human compliments don't always translate well." Velara turned to face him fully. Her multifaceted eyes studied his face as if searching for a lie. "Do you know what species I am?" "Ethran, right?" "Yes. And do you know what most species think when they see an Ethran?" Taehyun shrugged. "I've heard some of the comments. They think you're scary or strange. But I don't really care what they think." "Then why would you call me gorgeous?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "What purpose does this flattery serve?" "It's not flattery," Taehyun said. He looked genuinely hurt by the suggestion. "I don't say things I don't mean. That's a terrible habit for a diplomat, and an even worse habit for a person." Other beings had started to gather near the entrance to the observation deck. Word was spreading through the station. A human was speaking to an Ethran. More than that, he was standing close to her, looking directly at her, seemingly unafraid. Jiwoo appeared at the entrance, her face tight with concern. She caught Taehyun's eye and shook her head slightly. This was dangerous. This was drawing attention. Velara's appendages began moving again, faster now. "In all my years serving the Coalition, across hundreds of worlds and thousands of interactions, no one has ever used that word to describe me or my people." "Then they're not paying attention," Taehyun said. "Or perhaps you're not being honest." "I'm being completely honest." He gestured toward her. "Look at you. The way the light moves through your skin, those patterns are like auroras, and your features catch the light like cut diamonds. The way you move is graceful and strong at the same time. How is that not gorgeous?" Velara stood very still. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. "Why do you call me gorgeous?" The question echoed through the observation deck. The few beings who had gathered to watch fell silent. Even Jiwoo stopped trying to signal Taehyun to leave. Taehyun looked at Velara with clear, honest eyes. He opened his mouth to answer, and everyone leaned forward to hear what the human would say.